So the transfer window was dramatic to the end. Right up to 11 o'clock last night, there was deals being closed. There was all this fuss over whether Fellaini was going to go to Manchester United or not. They did manage to close that deal, but it was one of the few that they did manage to do. And overall, Premier League clubs spent £600 million in this transfer window, which is a record. That's the gross figure. They spent 400 million net, so that's net of the money they exchanged between themselves, which again is a record figure. And this all stems from the £5.5 billion TV deal that the Premier League did for the next 3 years. Basically, they're gambling all that money on trying to stay in the Premier League, or if they're a club that challenges for Europe, trying to stay in Europe. Richard Scudamore, when they did that deal, expressed these hopes that maybe they wouldn't spend all this money on wages and transfer fees. I think that was always a forlorn hope, because there's a circle whereby the attractiveness of staying in the Premier League or of staying in Europe becomes so great that you need to spend to gamble on staying there, basically, and that's what we've seen clubs do. There's been a real contrast between those clubs that did their business early, if you like, and they tend to be ones that have employed this new sort of director of football model, like Spurs and Manchester City, who did their deals very early on in a fairly ordered way, and the late sort of scramble of clubs like Arsenal and Manchester United, which traditionally you would think of as well-run clubs, but for various reasons they had to leave it late. I mean, Arsenal, it paid off for them. They failed obviously in their long pursuit of Suarez, but then they picked up Ozil, who's a fantastic player and will really light up the Premier League, and their fans were suitably excited yesterday. Manchester United, it's the complete opposite. They've had a real tumultuous summer. They've got this new team of Ed Woodward as chief executive and David Moyes as manager, obviously replacing Sir Alex Ferguson, and they've had a really difficult summer. They ended up paying more for Fellaini than they needed to. They didn't bring any of the other players that they wanted to. They had this bizarre situation in Spain where you ended up with imposters supposedly acting for Manchester United, trying to sign this player Herrera, and all in all, it was a summer to forget for Manchester United fans. Of those clubs outside really the sort of big 4 or 5, I think the ones that did particularly well were Everton, who did a flurry of late deals, brought in Romelu Lukaku from Chelsea, who I thought would probably stay at Stamford Bridge this season, but Jose Mourinho's decided to let him go out on loan again, and he did fantastically well for West Bromwich Albion last year. He decided not to return to the Hawthorns and has instead gone to Everton, and they also brought in McCarthy from Wigan. Obviously they let Fellaini go, but I think all in all they've done some very good business, as they say, this transfer window. And Liverpool I think have done well as well in quite an understated way. Again, I think Victor Moses is an interesting loan signing from Chelsea. They brought in some solid cover in defence, which they needed, and crucially they've kept hold of Suarez, and in a way, you know, keeping hold of him might prove to be their biggest signing. Of those clubs that didn't do quite so well, I mean, I think you have to look at the scramble among some of those clubs that will be hoping to stay up. The sheer turnover of players at clubs like Crystal Palace and Hull, I think they've thrown a lot at the wall and they're hoping it will stick, basically. And if you look at Newcastle, I mean, you know, Joe Kinnear was brought in there. We talked about directors of football who seem to be doing a job in an orderly way. I mean, he's done the job in such an orderly way that doesn't seem to have done anything. Of course, you know, he famously boasted of having this fantastic contacts book and being able to open every door in football, and those doors seem to have remained sort of resolutely locked at the moment.